The registry office smelled like stale ink and wilting flowers, the kind of place where big decisions happen quietly. I noticed that before my mother-in-law stood up, smoothed her blazer, and smiled like she was doing everyone a favor. "As a wedding gift," she announced, voice carrying across the room, "I allow the newlywed to register with me." A ripple of polite applause followed. I felt my shoulders tense. My name is Caleb Warren, and I've always had a bad habit of staying calm too long, of letting things slide because I don't want to make a scene. So I smiled. "Thank you," I said evenly, "but I already have my own house downtown." I thought that would settle it. It was true. Clear. Simple. Then Lena squeezed my hand hard. Too hard. "But my sister and her husband have already moved there," she said quickly. "They're doing renovations." The word already landed like a dropped plate. The registrar froze mid-motion, stamp hovering above the page. A few guests leaned forward, suddenly interested. My mother-in-law didn't look surprised, she looked pleased, like this was part of the plan. I stared at Lena. She avoided my eyes, focusing on the floor as if it might explain everything for her. My mind flashed to the blue door downtown, the quiet mornings, the place I rebuilt piece by piece after my divorce. A space that was finally mine. I looked at the registrar. Then at the guest. Then back at my wife. I straightened my tie, felt the familiar weight of my keys in my pocket, and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "I think we need to pause because there seems to be some confusion about who owns that house." The room didn't exhale after I spoke. It tightened. My mother-in-law let out a soft laugh, the kind meant to shrink what I'd said. "Oh, Caleb. There's no confusion," she replied. "Family arrangements don't need legal language." That sentence told me more than she realized. Lena finally looked up at me. Her smile was fragile, practiced. "We talked about helping them," she said quietly. "It's just for a little while." I searched her face for the version of her I married, the one who valued honesty, who hated surprises. What I found instead was fear. Not of me but of disappointing everyone else. "How long is a little while?" I asked. She hesitated. A pause small enough to miss, big enough to matter. "Until they get back on their feet." My sister-in-law shifted in her seat behind us. I noticed paint under her fingernails, fresh and white. "Not from today. From weeks of work. From settling in." The registrar cleared her throat again. "Shall we continue with the paperwork?" Everyone turned to me. I nodded because I didn't want this moment, our moment, rewritten as the day I embarrassed my wife. That's another flaw of mine. I carry things so others don't have to. We signed. We smiled for photos. Applause filled the room like a recording played at the wrong time. As we stepped aside, my mother-in-law leaned close and whispered, warm and certain, "You'll see. This will work out." I smiled back. Because in my pocket, my phone vibrated, not with congratulations but with a notification from my home security app. Motion detected, living room. I didn't say anything to Lena about the alert. I just slipped the phone back into my pocket and told her I needed air. She nodded too fast, relief crossing her face like she'd been waiting for me to remove myself. The drive downtown was quiet except for the turn signal clicking like a countdown. I noticed things I usually don't, the way the city light hit the windshield, the faint smell of lilies from her bouquet still on my jacket. My hands were steady on the wheel, but my jaw ached from how tightly I'd been holding it all day. When I pulled up, the porch light was on. I hadn't turned it on before the wedding. The blue front door was unlocked. That was the second thing that didn't belong to this moment. Inside, the house sounded wrong, voices overlapping, music playing softly, cabinets opening and closing like a place mid-conversation. My living room looked like it had been rearranged by people who didn't ask. The couch angled differently. A new rug, still creased from packaging. My framed photo from a solo hike years ago was gone, replaced by a print I didn't recognize. "Caleb?" My sister-in-law called from the kitchen, cheerful. "You're back early." Early. As if I'd stepped out for errands. She stood there holding a mug from my cabinet, the chipped one I always used, while her husband leaned over my counter discussing backsplash options like this was a showroom. "How long?" I asked. She smiled. "Your wife said we could start making it our own." I nodded slowly, feeling something settle into place. Because in that moment, I understood the truth they'd all been circling. They didn't think they were borrowing my house. They thought I'd already given it away. I walked past them without another word, straight down the hallway. My footsteps sounded louder than they should have, like the house was amplifying my presence out of guilt. The door to my study was closed. That stopped me. I never closed that door. Inside, the desk was bare. No lamp. No notebooks. The small wooden box my father gave me, gone. In its place sat a neatly stacked pile of mail, all addressed to Sarah and Mark. My address. Their names. I stood there longer than I meant to, staring at the empty space where my life used to be arranged exactly the way I needed it. I've always been particular about order. That's another flaw of mine. I believe control keeps things from falling apart. Behind me, my brother-in-law cleared his throat. We moved some stuff to storage, he said carefully. Didn't want it damaged during the remodel. Storage where? I asked. He hesitated. Your wife handled that. Of course she did. I felt something shift, not explode, not break, just settle. Calm, heavy, unavoidable. I took my phone out again, not to call anyone, but to open a folder I hadn't touched in months. Documents. Deeds. Permissions. Sarah leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. You're not upset, are you? Mom said you'd be flexible. I looked at her, then at the house, then back at the phone in my hand. No, I said quietly. I'm not upset. Because standing there, in a house that no longer felt like mine, I realized something they never considered. Flexibility doesn't mean surrender. And they had no idea what I'd already put in writing. I left before they could ask more questions. I told them I needed to get back to the reception. It wasn't a lie, just not the whole truth. The front door clicked shut behind me, and for the first time that day I let my shoulders drop. In the car, I sat with the engine off, hands resting on the steering wheel, breathing in the familiar scent of worn leather. I didn't feel angry. That surprised me. I felt organized, like pieces finally lining up. I opened the folder on my phone again. The house wasn't just in my name, it was protected by a quiet clause I'd insisted on after my divorce. No additional residence without written consent from the owner. No exceptions. Not even for family. My lawyer had called it excessive. I'd called it peace of mind. I typed a short message to Lena. We'll talk tonight. I love you. That was true too, another human flaw of mine. I love even when it costs me clarity. At the reception, the music was louder, the lights warmer. My mother-in-law hugged me like nothing was wrong. Sarah laughed with guests, already comfortable, already settled. I smiled when required. I toasted when expected. Then my phone buzzed again. Not a notification this time, a reply. From Lena. They said you wouldn't mind. Mom promised them it was handled. I read it twice, slowly. Across the room, Sarah raised her glass at me, grinning like someone who believed the ending was already written. I slipped my phone back into my pocket, met her gaze and lifted my glass in return. Because tomorrow morning, a very different message was scheduled to be delivered. One that didn't require my permission anymore. The morning light crept in through the hotel curtains like it didn't want to wake us. Lena was still asleep, her makeup smudged just enough to remind me how long the day before had been. I lay there listening to her breathe, steady and calm, while my own thoughts moved in careful lines. I slipped out of bed quietly and went down to the lobby with my phone and a cup of coffee that tasted burnt. My lawyer answered on the second ring. That wasn't luck, it was timing. I'd scheduled the email the night before, set to send at 8 a.m. sharp. Did you get it? I asked. He confirmed. Papers had been delivered electronically and physically. Notices issued. No accusations. Just facts, boundaries and a timeline. Back upstairs, Lena was awake, sitting on the edge of the bed, phone in hand. Her face was pale. They're freaking out, she said. Mom says you embarrassed her. Sarah says you're being cruel. I sat across from her, noticing how the carpet felt rough under my bare feet. Did anyone ask what they did to me? She didn't answer. She just looked tired. My phone buzzed again. This time it was the security app, live feed requested from the house downtown. I didn't open it yet. I didn't need to. I'm not throwing anyone out, I said gently. I'm asking them to leave what was never theirs. Lena's eyes filled, not with anger, but with something closer to understanding. And that's when my phone rang again. Not family. The contractor. They stopped the renovation, he said. Said the owner revoked permission. I ended the call, finally opened the camera feed, and watched them standing in my living room, frozen, realizing the house had chosen its owner back. The feed stayed open longer than it needed to. Sarah paced the living room, phone pressed to her ear, her movements sharp and offended, like the walls had betrayed her. Mark stood near the window, hands on his hips, staring out at a city that suddenly wasn't welcoming anymore. My couch, sat untouched between them, an island no one wanted to claim. I closed the app. Lena sat beside me on the bed, knees pulled to her chest. She looked smaller like that. Not guilty. Not defensive. Just exposed. I didn't think they'd take over, she said quietly. I thought you'd say no, and I wanted them to hear it from you, not me. That landed harder than any accusation. I rubbed my palms together, feeling the dry skin catch. Another flaw, assuming silence will protect everyone. It never does. I needed you to choose me, I said. Not loudly. Not angrily. Not later. Not privately. Right then. She nodded, tears finally spilling, not dramatic, just honest. I know. My phone buzzed again. A text from my mother-in-law this time. You've made this very difficult. I stared at the message, then turned the phone face down on the nightstand. Outside, a siren passed and faded. Inside, something settled. No triumph, no victory. Just clarity. Lena reached for my hand, tentative. I let her take it. Because standing my ground had cost me peace, but losing myself would have cost me everything. And tomorrow we'd have to decide whether this marriage was built on space we shared, or space I'd finally reclaimed. We drove to the house together that afternoon. No music. No rehearsed speeches. Just the sound of tires over pavement and the quiet weight of decisions finally being faced. Sarah and Mark were gone when we arrived. Not dramatically, no slammed doors, no mess left behind. Just emptiness. The plastic sheets were folded. The new rug was rolled up and leaned against the wall like something waiting to be returned. My bookshelf was back where it belonged, slightly crooked as if someone had rushed. Lena stood in the doorway, hands in her coat pockets. They're staying with Mom, she said. She's furious. I nodded. She'll survive. We walked through the room slowly. I noticed small things, the scuff on the floor where my desk had been dragged, the faint outline of a picture that hadn't been mine. Evidence, not wounds. In the study, Lena stopped. I didn't protect you, she said. No excuses. No softening. Just truth. That mattered. I don't need protecting, I replied. I need partnership. She reached for my hand, this time without urgency. Without fear. Just choice. We stood there, sunlight cutting across the empty desk, the house quiet in a way that felt earned. Later, as we locked up, Lena paused on the porch. So, downtown, she said carefully. Is there room for us? I slipped the keys into my pocket and met her eyes. There is, I said. But only if we both live here honestly. She nodded. And for the first time since the registry office, the house didn't feel like something being taken from me. It felt like something I was finally sharing on my terms.